This is Art Television.
Coming up, State of Business, sponsored by
UHD quality video streaming, internet like a boss, SLT Mobitel Fiber,
IWS Aviation.
Good evening and welcome to the State of Business on Art Television. I am Chavika Samarasinghe. Let's have a look at the headlines. 70% of the population seeks to abolish the executive presidency. Export sector calls for comprehensive support. News in detail. The June 2022 syndicated survey conducted by Verite Research revealed that 70% of the country's population believes that the executive presidency should be abolished. Only 15% said that the executive presidency should not be abolished. The distribution of opinion was very similar across all age groups. The southern, eastern, and northern provinces had a similar distribution of opinion, with over 80% saying the executive presidency should be abolished. The poll was conducted as part of the syndicated survey instrument by Verite Research. The instrument also provides other organizations the opportunity to survey sentiments in Sri Lanka. The June 2022 poll is based on an island-wide nationally representative sample of responses from 1,052 Sri Lankan adults. The sample and methodology were designed to ensure that the error margin would be under 3% at a 95% confidence level. The polling partner was Vanguard Survey Limited. Meanwhile, Transparency International Sri Lanka has asked presidential hopefuls to publicly declare their assets and display a personal commitment to transparency ahead of the parliamentary vote on the 20th of July. Transparency International said Sri Lankans have delivered a clear message that they will no longer tolerate corrupt leaders. The current candidates, who are long-serving members of the Sri Lankan parliament, need to take new steps to bolster the faith of the people in them. A public declaration of assets would be one important step to demonstrate to the people their commitment to transparency and accountability. Transparency International also noted that members of parliament are not required to legally publicize their assets. The anti-corruption watchdog asked the candidates to heed the call of the citizens for clean politics and be the change the country needs. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka yesterday called on the acting president Ranil Wickremesinghe to revoke the state of emergency. The state of emergency was declared by the acting president ahead of the election of a new president through the parliament. The Bar Association says the proclamation must be revoked to ensure fundamental rights, including the freedom of speech and peaceful assembly, such that all aspects of sovereignty of the people are respected, protected, and not violated by the state or its agents. The BASL maintains that emergency regulations must not be used to suppress any legitimate expression of opinion on the election of the president, nor to suppress any dissent or disagreement on a particular candidate. The BASL notes that in terms of the law, any attempt to unduly influence a member of parliament or bribe a member of parliament in respect of his vote is a specific offence under the law. Any attempt to use any threat, undue influence, coercion or bribe to influence such a vote will be illegal and should not be condoned. However, whilst undue influence or threats are prohibited, the law does not preclude a member of the public from expressing views on the election, the choice of a particular candidate, or the relative merits or demerits of a candidate. The BASL, in its statement, also called on protesters to take utmost care to ensure that protests remain peaceful and must be wary of persons who might seek to cause violence and destruction during such protests. According to the extraordinary gazette issued, a state of emergency was declared in the interests of public security, the protection of public order, and the maintenance of supplies and services essential to the community. The Central Bank Executive Officers Union, in a letter to all party leaders representing the parliament, said that the government should get involved in a program with the International Monetary Fund as soon as possible. The union maintains that this is the most practical solution to get out of the crisis. The Union is of the opinion that there is no need for a detailed explanation about the economic crisis. Thus, it believes that the House of Representatives also understand the gravity of the catastrophe. Even though it has been more than 2 months since a new cabinet was appointed following political upheaval on the 9th of May 2022, the continued delay in the implementation of necessary fiscal sector reforms is not at all beneficial for the IMF program. On the other hand, the Central Bank Act, drafted in 2019 for a more independent central bank which will support the stability of the country, is yet to be passed in Parliament. And the IMF too has insisted that the central bank should be made more independent. Political stability is essential to achieve economic stability, and there should be a guiding economic and political program that can be agreed upon by all political parties in the existing parliament. For this, it is necessary to appoint a president and prime minister who would have public recognition. Therefore, the Union insists that all political parties representing the parliament actively engage to find a viable solution to the existing problem. The Central Bank Executive Officers Union is of the view that the opinion of the general public is not reflected through the existing majority in Parliament, as a result of poor decisions taken by the ruling party during the past 2.5 years. With this background, it is doubtful that an executive president elected by the current Parliament will have social acceptance to stay in power. Stay tuned. We will return after this commercial break.
This is the MySLT app. Wow, get extra GB. Check data usage. Activate data bundles. Pay bills. Report faults. Change a duck into a swan. I'm sorry, can't do that.
Download today. SLT Mobitel, the connection.
Welcome back. The National Chamber of Exporters of Sri Lanka yesterday highlighted that the export community, amidst the worsening economic crisis, requires comprehensive support. The Chamber maintains that international buyers tend to lose confidence in Sri Lankan exporters due to the instability in the country. Exporters have worked hard over many years to build credibility in the global market for Sri Lankan products and services, yet now they could lose this status. Therefore, policymakers must work to sustain exports and support the sector, which is a sizable foreign exchange earner for the country. The Chamber maintains that exporters have been performing well and fulfilling buyer expectation in the face of many challenges. However, factory operations have been limited due to various constraints, chief amongst which are the fuel and energy shortage. As losing clients to neighboring countries is not an option, the export sector must be classified as essential and provided with the required fuel and energy. The Chamber of Exports stresses that a competent authority should overlook international trade and work to strengthen supply chains. It has also requested that the government engage the public sector on export-related initiatives. The Chamber, in an endeavour to support Sri Lankan exporters, has initiated a market growth program and has set up links with Sri Lankan foreign missions and many other international trade chambers. The International Chamber of Exporters is planning several trade facilitation programs, including international trade delegations to key export destinations. In these efforts, the Chamber seeks the support of commercial officers in Sri Lankan foreign missions and related agencies. The Chamber invites exporters to register and join in these planned trade promotion programs. The International Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka, representing the business and industrial sector, highlights the importance of the decision to be made by the legislature. It maintains that the elected head of state will have to chart the course of the nation's future. The International Chamber of Commerce extends its support for democratic governance and holistic growth based upon transparency, accountability, and rule of law, which would consequently steer the nation towards a healthy economic landscape. Decisions on the economy should support the export, import, and tourism industries, small and medium enterprises, and other businesses which make a large contribution to the nation's GDP. The new president should prioritize the allocation of fuel for the local and export supply chain, transport, distribution, tourism, and export support services, as well as address food insecurity, medical shortages, fuel and gas shortages, and other economic issues. Restructuring national policy regaining internal stability, fostering international trade, tourism, agriculture and education, sustaining strong and healthy diplomatic relations, protection of foreign and local investments and industries, and reducing unemployment are some of the key considerations that legislators should engage. On behalf of the civil society and the business community, the International Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka urges the Parliament to exercise the sovereignty of the people for the people of the country according to the rule of law and thereby securing peace, stability and development for the nation. International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva on Saturday cited Sri Lanka to drive home the point of high debt-triggered crises globally. The IMF director highlighted Sri Lanka while speaking at the G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors hybrid meeting in Bali, Indonesia. The IMF director called for strong global leadership. She said debt has reached multi-year highs. Over 30% of emerging and developing countries are at or near debt distress. For low-income countries, that number is 60%. The IMF chief also said that global economic outlook has darkened significantly and uncertainty is exceptionally high. Downside risks about which the IMF had previously warned have now materialized. She said the war in Ukraine has intensified, exerting added pressures on commodity and food prices. Global financial conditions are tightening more than previously anticipated, and continuing pandemic-related disruptions and renewed bottlenecks in global supply chains are weighing on economic activity. Director Georgieva said the IMF later this month will project a further downgrade in global growth for both 2022 and 2023 in its World Economic Outlook update. It was also emphasized that emerging and developing countries have been experiencing sustained capital outflows for 4 months in a row. They now suffer the risk of reversing 3 decades of catching up with advanced economies and instead falling further behind. She shared 3 priorities on how the world can navigate this challenging environment. First, these countries must do everything in their power to reduce inflation. Second, fiscal policy must help central bank efforts to tame inflation. This is a complex task. Third, a fresh impetus for global cooperation will be critical to confront the multiple crises the world is facing, particularly the risk from food insecurity and high debt. Stay tuned for stock updates.
Stay and use more data. Bowl one data bowl one. More data with low latency. Data bowl one data bowl one. Take it anywhere with SLT Go. Data bowl one data bowl one.
A non-stop journey with Data Bowl 1 from SLT Mobitel Home Broadband.
Trading at the Colombo Stock Exchange ended on positive notes today. The all-share price index gained 107.51 points to close at 7,644.12, and the S&P SL20 gained 51.03 points to close at 2,474.11. Turnover was 1.1 billion rupees and over 66 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex rates. That's all our news for today. Take care and good night.
UHD quality video streaming. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
State of Business was sponsored by
UHD quality video streaming. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
IWS Aviation.